Hey guys, tonight we're pulling back the velvet curtain on one of history's greatest magic tricks. How 1,000 years of human life, ideas, and possibly regrettable haircuts just vanished. Gone. Poof. No wars, no inventions, not even a good cheese recipe. Imagine deleting a millennium from your phone's photo album, except it's Europe, and the Vatican's got the only backup, and they've password protected it, changed the password, and then eaten the sticky note. Before we plunge into the abyss, do me a favor and tap that like button and subscribe if you're into this kind of late-night historical sleepy storytelling. Also, comment below. If you could erase any year from your own timeline, which one would it be? For me, it's that year I thought frosted tips were coming back. Never again. Now, dim the lights and get comfortable. If you have a secret stash of snacks, now's the time. If you have a secret Vatican archive in your basement, please let us know. We'll keep it between us. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what actually happened during the so-called Dark Ages? Did people really just stop inventing, stop fighting, and start collectively snoozing for 1,000 years? Did the monks at the Vatican really have the only keys to knowledge, and were those keys just shaped like breadsticks? What was so dangerous about a bookshelf that it needed to be locked away from civilization for centuries? And why, out of all the places on Earth, did Europe get assigned the role of historical amnesia patient, while the rest of the world was overachieving in science and poetry? Would you even notice if 3 centuries disappeared from your own life? Or would you just be relieved your gym membership expired? Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 614, or maybe it's 900, or maybe that year never actually happened at all. You open your eyes in a fog so dense you can barely see the calendar, and even the monks seem to be whispering, "What day is it anyway?" You have no phone, no Wi-Fi, no idea who's in charge, and the only reliable source of news is a guy in a robe who hasn't seen daylight since the fall of Rome. Good luck. The rooster's crow is your only alarm clock, but you're not sure if it's actually morning or just the rooster's elaborate prank. You stumble outside. Nobody agrees on the year. Some mutter it's 700. The guy in charge of the village calendar shrugs and offers you a turnip. There are no festivals, no great announcements, just the vague sense that something important should be happening but isn't. You look around. The world feels paused, like someone pressed snooze on civilization and then left for lunch. You have entered the missing millennium, where the most accurate timepiece is whoever's got the least mold on their bread. You try asking someone, just to clarify where, or rather, when you are. The blacksmith scratches his head and mutters something about the year of our Lord. But even he can't remember if that Lord was local, Roman, or just the village dog. Your neighbour, who claims to be 80, admits he lost count after the great counting error of whenever that was. The official village record is a half-burned wooden board listing a few saints' days and a very ambitious recipe for soup. There's no Google Calendar here, just a vague sense of guilt that you've forgotten your own birthday for a decade or two. No one is worried, though. Time, it turns out, is more of a group activity than a science. It's as if the whole village is in a permanent state of jet lag, except nobody has left the county in 3 generations. You spot the priest, who seems to be the only one with access to any official dates. But when pressed, he simply says, "It's always the right time to repent," which is not particularly helpful for scheduling laundry. The concept of a new year is both thrilling and terrifying. There are whispers that the monks at the distant abbey might have updated their calendar, but news travels at the speed of donkey and gets edited for theological accuracy before arriving. Last year, or what might have been last year, you celebrated St. Eustace's feast twice, just in case. This year, nobody's sure if St. Eustace ever existed or if he was just a typo that got canonized. And yet, the world keeps spinning, probably. You watch as villagers shuffle about their business, planting fields, repairing fences, and arguing over whose goat ate whose dinner. It's comforting, in a strange way, how life just drifts forward, unbothered by the absence of history's big moments. No one is writing great epics, no statues are being chiseled, and nobody is naming any new constellations. The only thing anyone seems to record is who owes whom a turnip. If you look up, the sky is vast, endless, and curiously blank, a metaphorical weather forecast for the entire missing millennium. There's no talk of wars or legendary deeds, just the gentle patter of rain and the recurring debate over whether the sun rose later this morning, or if everyone simply overslept. You realize that in a world without a timeline, every day is both a beginning and an ending, a kind of historical Groundhog Day, but with fewer marmots and a lot more uncertainty about the time of day. It's easy to laugh until you realize that not knowing the year is actually an enormous relief. There's no pressure to achieve, no milestones to miss, and nobody is keeping score. Your existential crisis is gently soothed by the knowledge that even if you invented the wheel, it might take 3 centuries for anyone to notice, and by then, someone will have filed it under miscellaneous miracles. You settle back, grateful for the gentle anonymity of the missing millennium. Here, you're free from deadlines, free from history's judgments, and free from the burden of knowing exactly when you are. In the lost century, time is just a rumor, and honestly, that might be the best-kept secret of all. And with that, your day in the fog of forgotten years drifts on, quiet, calm, curiously peaceful, and entirely undocumented. Breakfast is served, a bowl of grey, flavourless mush. Is it porridge? Is it gruel? Is it leftover from the last empire? The only spice available is speculation. There's no record of recipes, and nobody's inventing the sandwich. As you chew, the silence of history is almost louder than your stomach. Across the table, the family stares blankly. Nobody is talking about inventions or news, because apparently there hasn't been any for centuries. The Vatican says, "This is for your own good," as your cereal gently dissolves into existential dread. You poke at the contents of your wooden bowl, hoping for a hidden raisin, or, dare you dream, a piece of honeycomb. But all you find is the familiar, gluey resistance of what the village simply calls the daily substance. The recipe is passed down by word of mouth and consists of whatever grain is left, a pinch of hope, and enough water to make it not entirely solid. It's the culinary equivalent of a polite shrug. Milk is an aspiration. Most mornings, you get a suspiciously clear liquid that could be water, very tired goat's milk, or the result of a failed attempt at alchemy. If there's bread, it's yesterday's. If there's cheese, it's either a miracle or a mistake. Butter is whispered about in myth, usually by grandmothers who claim to have seen it once, long ago, before the recipe was erased for the good of the soul. Breakfast conversation, if it happens, is a slow shuffle of vague observations. Weather's holding, someone says, staring at the same grey sky that's held since Charlemagne, if Charlemagne even existed. There's the usual complaint about the quality of the porridge, delivered in the same tone as one might discuss the existence of the afterlife. Unprovable. But everyone agrees it's not quite what was promised. Nobody asks, what's for breakfast tomorrow? It's always the same. The only thing that changes is the level of existential dread you add to taste. You glance at your neighbour's bowl, half expecting them to have found a small artifact from the Roman Empire at the bottom. No luck, just more mush. Some days, the meal is so bland you wonder if time itself has fallen into the pot and boiled away. In a world where even flavour is forgotten, the idea of culinary innovation is as laughable as a 3-day weekend. The best part of the meal, if you can call it that, is the sense of community in shared suffering. Everyone at the table is chewing through history's pause button, united in blandness. You wonder what the rest of Europe is eating, but there are no letters, no cookbooks, no medieval master chef. The Vatican doesn't permit new recipes. Even spices are suspect, unless the local priest deems them holy, and then only in quantities so tiny they disappear somewhere between the bowl and the blessing. No one dares experiment with food. The last villager to try adding wild berries to the mush was accused of heresy. and had to spend a month reciting psalms and picking moss out of his teeth. You contemplate reaching for a pinch of salt, if you can find it, but the salt belongs to the monks, who use it exclusively for preserving ancient manuscripts, not for improving breakfast. You finish your bowl in silence, spoon scraping against the wood with all the energy of a Gregorian chant. There's a sense of quiet relief when it's over, not because you're full, but because you survived another meal without accidentally causing a theological crisis. Dishes are cleaned with a damp rag and a prayer for better times. Outside, the world goes on, unaware of how truly unremarkable your breakfast is. You pack away your wooden spoon, gird yourself for the day's chores, and try not to think about the next meal. In the lost century, breakfast is not a feast, not a joy, not even a break in the monotony. It's just one more flavourless spoonful in a world that's forgotten how to spice things up. But there's comfort in routine. If nothing ever changes, at least nothing can go wrong. You survived breakfast in the void. And that, according to the monks, is a blessing in itself. Your tunic is suspiciously ill-fitting, possibly older than the century itself. There's a hat that may have once been considered in, but the only fashion influencer is the local priest, who's accessorizing with a single, very powerful ring of keys. Nobody paints portraits, and if you invent a new look, the only place it will end up is the monastery's lost and found. It's an era where you could walk around with 2 left shoes and nobody would bat an eye if anyone could see you through the historical fog. You shuffle across the hard-packed dirt floor, feeling the unmistakable scratch of homespun wool against your legs, a sensation that's halfway between mild discomfort and spiritual trial. Your tunic was probably once beige, but the passage of forgotten decades and creative laundry methods have transformed it into a colour best described as historically ambiguous. The belt is a piece of rope tied with the sort of knot that says, "I was running late to Vespers." Your shoes, if you're lucky enough to have a matching pair, are fashioned from leather so stiff that every step sounds like you're trying to sneak through a field of crackers. In this lost century, fashion is less a matter of personal taste and more a question of what didn't rot over the winter. Textiles are rare, dyes are rarer, and the only consistent style advice is cover whatever you can. If you ask about trends, someone will shrug and point to a relic, usually a sandal found in the bottom of a well, or a scrap of cloak still clinging to the shoulder of a statue nobody recognizes. There's no such thing as out of season. The season is always wear something or freeze. Laundry Day is a community event. Garments are soaked in the river, pounded with rocks, and aired out on bushes until they're almost, but not quite, dry. The resulting fresh scent is a mix of riverweed, campfire smoke, and generational trauma. Fabric softener hasn't been invented yet, so the only thing fluffy about your wardrobe is the moss growing on your shoes. Buttons are luxury items. If you have one, it probably doubles as family heirloom, currency, and emergency talisman. Accessories are another story. The village priest's ring of keys, jangling from his belt, is both a status symbol and an insurance policy. You, on the other hand, might own a hat, a shapeless, faded thing that may once have protected someone important from the sun, or possibly been used as a bowl in desperate times. Jewelry exists, but it's mostly made from carved bone or the occasional lucky pebble. If someone's wearing an actual metal ring, odds are they're either nobility or they owe a terrifying favour to the blacksmith. Hairstyles are practical, leaning toward, "I cut this myself," or "My neighbour tried and we don't talk about it." There are no mirrors, only guesses, and perhaps a reflective puddle if you're feeling brave. Beards are common, not as a statement, but as a concession to the fact that razors are both expensive and, in these uncertain times, slightly heretical. As for colour coordination, the only palette you need to know is muddy earth tones. No one knows what matching means if your outfit is all one shade. It's either an accident or a sign that the dye pot finally boiled over. You dream of stripes, patterns, or something with a little pizzazz, but the only thing bright in your world is the odd, accidental berry stain, impossible to wash out, but at least it's unique. If you're hoping for a portrait to immortalize your look, think again. Artists are rare, paint is expensive, and the only people getting their likeness recorded are saints, popes, and the occasional goose with ecclesiastical connections. So you carry your style with a kind of medieval confidence, knowing that history will neither judge nor remember your outfit. And so, you walk through the village, tunic askew, shoes mismatched, hat precarious, utterly unremarkable, wonderfully anonymous, and, for once, blissfully free from the tyranny of trends. In the missing millennium, the only dress code is survival, and the only runway is the muddy road between here and the next forgotten century. You say good morning, but what language was that? Everyone mumbles in a dialect that sounds like Latin, but could just as easily be advanced soup. Nobody is quite sure what's being said, but everyone nods anyway. All official business is conducted in a language only 3 monks can read, and even they aren't totally confident. It's like living inside a game of historical telephone where the only rule is to make it more confusing. On your way to the well, you hear greetings in every possible accent. A salve, here, a buongiorno, there, and something that might have once been Celtic, or might just be a sneeze. The children have invented their own version of Latin, mostly made up of bird noises and exaggerated yawns. You attempt to join in, and instantly invent a new local word meaning, I stepped in something. People seem pleased, or possibly concerned. It's always hard to tell. The older villagers insist on using phrases passed down from their great-grandparents, but the meanings have drifted so far from their origins that saying blessed turnip could either mean have a good day or your goat has gone missing. Meanwhile, the local priest peppers his sermons with ecclesiastical Latin, which sounds impressive until you realize he's mostly reciting the monastery's shopping list. When there's real business to discuss, grain tithes, whose pig ate the fence, the correct way to spell Saint Eustace, the village council gathers and unrolls a parchment written in an ancient hand. Only the monks claim to understand it, but they frequently pause, squint at the text, and then consult a book labelled Possibly Grammar. Their verdicts are delivered in a mixture of shrugs, confident humming, and a lot of finger-pointing. It's government by interpretive dance. If you need to make an official complaint, you'll have to fill out a form in triplicate, which means making 3 separate trips to the same monk, who will each time give you a different answer and a complimentary look of confusion. Every now and then, a messenger arrives from the next village, bearing news written in what appears to be the same alphabet, but rearranged just enough to be a cryptic crossword. You're expected to act impressed and grateful, even as you wonder if you've just been declared war upon or invited to a picnic. The local love letters are a study in ambiguity. You might receive a note that says, "With you, my heart dances like a turnip in spring," which could be either a marriage proposal or a complaint about vegetable theft. Flirting is conducted almost entirely through furtive glances, bread exchanges, and the strategic dropping of ambiguous nouns. Sometimes, the monks attempt to teach the children proper Latin. The lessons last exactly as long as it takes for someone to fall off a stool. Most of the grammar survives only as a series of songs about saints, with suspiciously similar names. By the time you've learned the word for bath, it's gone out of fashion, along with the practice itself. If you wander outside the village, dialects shift again. The next hamlet over insists on calling bread plof, while their word for hello is pronounced suspiciously like ow. Scholars will one day try to map these language zones and give up, because every valley has invented its own way to mispronounce good morning. The real magic of the missing millennium is that nobody seems bothered by the confusion. You greet, mumble, wave, and smile, and the world smiles back, sometimes nervously but always politely. Meaning is negotiated, gestures fill the gaps, and everyone pretends to understand everyone else, because life is too short and time too uncertain to waste on getting every word right. And so, in the quiet fog of lost languages, you learn to speak with your hands, your bread, and your best guess. Because in the end, The point isn't to be understood, it's to be remembered, somewhere, in some language, even if only by the village geese. Today is Thursday? Or is it Saint Unverifiable's Day? The church bell rings, but for what? The calendar changes more often than the weather. If you try to schedule anything, you're met with vague references to feasts, eclipses, or the Great Forgetting, which nobody wants to discuss. The year might actually be 732, or possibly Tuesday. Best not to ask. You awaken to the sound of distant bells and an announcement from the town crier, "Rejoice, for today is the feast of the blameless martyr," or was that yesterday? Everyone nods, pretending they know what's going on, but you catch a few nervous glances. You try to ask your neighbour if it's market day, but she's already deep in conversation about whether or not the moon was full last night, because apparently that's relevant to when you can sell turnips. Calendars, in theory, are meant to keep life organised, but here in the vanished centuries, they're more like mood rings for the village. Some months have 32 days, some weeks have 9. There's a rumour that a clever abbot tried to introduce a new system, but the only thing that survived was a cryptic rhyme involving cabbage and regret. Public holidays are decided by a show of hands, the weather, and whether the local priest feels like celebrating or fasting. There's always a festival happening somewhere, but nobody's really sure which one. The village once tried to hold a harvest festival, but halfway through someone remembered it wasn't actually harvest season. The solution was to keep dancing until the monks got tired and called it a night. The only thing more unreliable than the date is the hour. Sundials are a luxury, so time is mostly measured by the angle of someone's shadow or the enthusiasm of the rooster. If you attempt to mark your own calendar, good luck. The only parchment you can find is already covered in someone else's failed timeline, and ink is reserved for the monastery's official records, which, upon closer inspection, are just long lists of saint days interspersed with the words, "See previous entry." Sometimes, the monks declare a jubilee year, which sounds grand, but mostly just involves skipping ahead in the calendar and hoping nobody notices. There is no Google, there are no birthdays, and anniversaries are celebrated only when someone randomly remembers. Occasionally, someone asks what year it is, and this triggers a round of heated debate. A few claim it's the year of our Lord 800 and something, while others swear it's the reign of King Charles, or possibly King Geoffrey, or maybe it's still the reign of the goat who wandered through last spring's coronation. In an era without standardized dates, time is like a group project nobody wants to be in charge of. Astronomy is no help either. The stars are beautiful, but their message is cryptic, and if an eclipse happens, it might be cause for a feast, a fast, or possibly a week of hiding indoors. Some insist you can tell the season by the length of the priest's sermons, but this only works if the priest hasn't lost his place in the liturgy. The real crime, though, is how freeing it is. You're never late. There's no such thing as a deadline, because there's no such thing as on time. You can promise to help with the hay sometime after St. Marginalia's Day, and everyone will nod, satisfied that a plan has been made. Nobody expects you to remember anniversaries, and if you forget your own birthday, you're in good company, so has everyone else. In the end, you stop worrying about calendars altogether. Time becomes less about counting days and more about savouring moments. The warmth of a fire, the laughter at a feast, the soft ring of a church bell echoing through the mist. Maybe it's Thursday. Maybe it's not. Either way, you're exactly where you need to be, lost in a gentle world where the only schedule that matters is the slow, sleepy rhythm of forgotten years. Your home, equal parts dust, stray parchment scraps, and a lingering whiff of old cheese and incense. Nobody sweeps, because brooms are only for witches. Cleaning is a lost art, and the closest thing to modern air freshener is an open window, which just lets in more fog. If you find a lost artifact under the bed, congratulations, it's probably a Vatican loan. You wake to sunlight streaming through a window that's never quite managed to be transparent. The glass, if you're lucky enough to have any, is rippled and foggy, giving everything outside the dreamy blur of a half-remembered memory. Inside, the furnishings are a unique blend of heirloom and whatever we didn't lose in last year's flood. The table leans, the stool wobbles, and the bed creaks in protest each time you remember to fluff the straw mattress. You briefly consider cleaning, but the only cleaning supply you own is a rag that looks suspiciously like it used to be someone's best tunic. In this lost age, dust is not the enemy. It's more of a roommate. There's a layer of it on every surface, gently preserving the past and possibly the odd breadcrumb from centuries ago. Underneath the dust, you'll find the essential ingredients of home life: splinters, crumbs, and the occasional scrap of parchment with writing so faded you're not sure if it's a shopping list or a confession. Every object tells a story. Mostly, I once belonged to someone who was slightly better at household chores. You try to recall when people stopped caring about cleanliness. Maybe it was after the last major plague, or after the local lord outlawed excessive sweeping because of witchcraft concerns. Perhaps it's just that with so little daylight, no one really notices the mess. If something smells odd, you simply hang another bit of dried rosemary from the ceiling and hope for the best. Candles mask most odors unless you accidentally light one made from last year's cheese supply. The concept of spring cleaning is still centuries away. Instead, the most ambitious villagers air out their linens twice a year, when the wind is strong enough to carry off any lingering spirits, dust mites, or in-laws. Sweeping is reserved for emergencies, like when a new priest visits and you need to create the illusion of domestic order. Even then, the sweeping tool is a bunch of twigs tied together and used as much for fending off livestock as for tackling dirt. Your storage options are limited. There's a chest for anything precious, a hook for whatever you need to keep out of the reach of goats, and a shelf for the things you hope nobody will ever inspect too closely. Spiders are inevitable. At this point, you consider them co-tenants. If you're lucky, the spiders pay their rent by keeping the flies in check, but sometimes they just seem to be running a shadow government in the rafters. When you find something unexpected, an old coin, a half-finished love letter, or a relic that might be saintly or just oddly shaped cheese, you simply shrug and add it to the collection. If the church comes asking about a missing chalice, you feign ignorance and offer them some soup. Everyone knows the real treasures are the blankets that haven't been chewed by mice and the pots that haven't rusted through. At the end of the day, you take comfort in the gentle clutter, the familiar chaos. No one judges the dust, the odd smells, or the piles of mysterious laundry. Instead, you're grateful for a roof overhead and a fire that's more smoke than flame. In the missing millennium, cleanliness isn't next to godliness. It's somewhere further down the street, knocking hopefully on the neighbor's door. So you curl up on your creaky bed, surrounded by history's debris, and drift off, trusting that if you wake up with a layer of dust on your nose, you'll just call it medieval skincare. After all, a little mess is proof that you and your household are still here, quietly surviving the centuries, one unswept floor at a time. There's a rumor the king died, or maybe he just left. Or maybe the whole concept of king was invented by monks who wanted better lunch options. Nobody really cares, because whoever's in charge is usually the one with the biggest cross and the strongest opinion about porridge. Sometimes, the king is replaced mid-week, but the official record just calls it business as usual. At least taxes remain a constant. You wake up to the news that the flag over the village has changed. Or maybe it just faded in the rain. It's hard to tell. The town crier is already hoarse from announcing new royal proclamations, but nobody listens closely. By the time you've untangled yourself from your straw mattress, the king may have abdicated, been usurped, or simply wandered off in search of breakfast. In the lost centuries, regime change is less a dramatic coup and more a gentle reshuffling of names you never learned in the first place. You might try asking your neighbor, who's seen 4 kings in her lifetime and still isn't sure if any of them actually existed. She shrugs and mutters, "As long as someone's collecting taxes and nobody's banning bread, I don't mind who sits on the throne." A reasonable attitude, given the local bishop has more gold in his wine goblet than most royals have in their treasury. The process of succession is, at best, mysterious. When a new king is needed, there's no grand coronation. Sometimes a distant cousin is declared ruler because he owns a horse, or perhaps because he can read. The monks prefer candidates who can sit still during a 2-hour mass, while the villagers would just like someone who doesn't raise taxes during Lent. Occasionally, there's a rumor that the next king will be chosen by divine sign, like a double-yolked egg, or a goat, that refuses to leave the council chamber. Royal decrees trickle down in the form of parchment scraps, if you're lucky. Most of the time, new laws arrive by word of mouth, then get reinterpreted by every household until what started as pay a new tax on wool becomes give your neighbor's goat a haircut before Easter. Enforcement is patchy. The only person who genuinely benefits from all this confusion is the tax collector, who keeps a ledger so creative it might qualify as early fiction. Now and then, a stranger rides into the village, claiming to be an envoy of the new king. They'll demand the best room at the inn, which is to say the room with the fewest rats, and an audience with the village elders. After a stern speech, a handful of coins, and a lecture on the importance of loyalty, they disappear, never to be seen again, possibly because they, too, have forgotten who's in charge. If you're ever in doubt about royal protocol, remember, the safest response to any official inquiry is an enthusiastic nod and a firm promise to pay taxes on time. Anything else risks attracting attention from someone carrying either a very large sword or a very large book of church law. In an era with more paperwork than parchment, it's always best to claim you're still waiting for the latest decree to be translated. Into what, you're not sure. Despite all this royal turnover, daily life remains stubbornly the same. Fields must be tended, bread must be baked, and someone must chase the chickens out of the church. You might be living under King Harold this week, Queen Matilda next, and the abbot's cat if things get really desperate. But the price of eggs, the smell of the cheese, and the rhythm of the seasons don't change for any king. And so you drift through the missing millennium, content in the knowledge that power is fleeting, crowns are easily misplaced, and the only true ruler is whoever gets to ring the village bell for supper. Long may they reign, at least until next Tuesday. There's talk that a villager once took a bath, but the details are shrouded in myth. Water is cold, soap is a rumour, and the church says cleanliness is next to something they forgot to write down. You wash your face with yesterday's soup, call it a miracle, and move on. The idea of bathing is so foreign here that it carries an air of suspicious glamour. Some whisper that the Romans used to do it regularly, lounging around in tiled palaces, chatting about philosophy and hygiene while soaking in steaming pools. Those rumours sound extravagant, almost dangerous. Here, in the vanished millennium, a bath means standing by a river and reconsidering all your life choices. Starting with the fact that you woke up before the fog had finished settling. To take a bath, you first need water. Easy enough, you'd think, living in a region defined by rain and mud, but the cold reality is that any liquid you find is usually too icy to approach with anything less than spiritual fortitude. The bravest villagers are those who dunk a handkerchief in the river and swab their faces, shivering with the holy satisfaction that only comes from confronting hypothermia for the sake of minimal cleanliness. The rest just wait for the next heavy rainstorm and stand outside, hoping the mud will rinse itself away. Soap, as a concept, exists mostly in the minds of storytellers and monks who once visited France. Occasionally, someone will boil animal fat with ashes, producing a substance that smells like burnt regrets and feels like sandpaper. If you're lucky enough to use it, you'll emerge both cleaner and slightly less attached to the top layer of your skin. More often, you make do with what you have: leftover soup, a handful of fragrant herbs, or, if you're truly desperate, vigorous prayer. Bathing is not a private ritual. It is a village event, conducted in the open or, for the more modest, behind a strategically placed cart. Children shriek and scatter if they sense an adult is about to attempt a wash, either out of respect, fear, or just because it's more fun to hide in the hayloft than risk being next. The community treats any mention of bathing with awe and a hint of suspicion, as if personal hygiene is one step away from witchcraft. On rare feast days, the church might encourage a little extra scrubbing, especially before Holy Communion. Everyone dutifully lines up at the well, splashing a little water on their faces and exchanging wary glances. You're never sure if you're preparing your soul or just trying to wash the chicken feathers off your collar. Either way, the effect is largely psychological. You feel fresher for all of 5 minutes, or until the neighbour's pig rolls in the dust and resets the village's scent profile to earthy barnyard. Of course, the nobility claim to be above such things. They wear layers of perfume, musk, and optimism, assuming that if you can't see the grime, it must not be there. Their bathhouses, if they exist, are tiny shrines to extravagance. One wooden tub, a handful of herbs, and enough privacy to make the whole village talk for weeks. The rest of us just get on with it, quietly building up the kind of immune systems that could probably defeat small armies. By the end of the day, you're more dust than human, and you've accepted that your next proper bath will come with the next pope, or perhaps the next era entirely. Until then, you cherish the rare moments when the rain falls warm, the river doesn't bite, and the soup is too thin to stick to your skin. You crawl under your blanket, smelling faintly of smoke, time, and the wisdom of the unwashed. You drift to sleep, secure in the knowledge that your ancestors survived, and probably thrived, without ever once using a loofah. In the missing millennium, dirt is just another way to keep the centuries close. You're assigned to help in the fields. The fields are somewhere. Everyone's job title is Peasant, unpaid. Nobody's sure what the harvest is for, but the monks take their cut in both grain and gossip. Productivity is measured in prayers, and nobody's invented the lunch break yet. Your day begins before the sun, mostly because nobody in the village trusts clocks. Instead, work starts when the rooster, who has never been late, except when he oversleeps, crows, or when you hear the familiar bellow of the village elder reminding everyone to get moving. You pull on your mud-stiff boots, glance longingly at your unfinished bowl of grey mush, and step outside to join the slow migration toward wherever the fields are hiding this year. Once there, you find yourself in a sea of equally confused villagers. Everyone has a tool, or at least something that could theoretically poke a root. The work is less about coordinated agriculture and more about dig here, then dig somewhere else. Nobody remembers planting anything, but there's always hope that a turnip or a potato might be discovered like buried treasure. One neighbour claims he once found a carrot and was celebrated for a week, until the monks realised it was actually a lost relic and confiscated it for safekeeping, and probably for soup. Tasks are assigned by consensus, or just by whoever is loudest that morning. Some weed, some sow, some stare thoughtfully at patches of dirt, contemplating the meaning of medieval agriculture. You're put in charge of encouragement, which mainly involves standing nearby and looking supportive. It's unclear if this position is honorary or punishment for that time you accidentally let the goat into the grain store. If you're feeling ambitious, you might attempt to keep track of what's been done, how many bushels, how many weeds, how many times the village dog has stolen your only glove. But records are forbidden unless kept by a monk, and their preferred system is 1 prayer per handful. Nobody questions the math, especially since the monks have a monopoly on writing implements. Breaks are unofficial and generally frowned upon. The idea of lunch is just as mysterious as the concept of weekends. If you're lucky, someone's grandmother appears around midday with a chunk of ancient bread and something that might be cheese. You eat quickly and quietly, hunched over a rock, pretending not to notice that the local birds are also eyeing your meal. Hydration is taken seriously, but the water jug always seems to be a mile away, downhill through mud, guarded by a suspiciously territorial goose. Conversation in the fields is as repetitive as the work. The top topics are weather, blisters, and the universal hope that this year the harvest will be so good that the monks have to build a bigger storeroom. Someone always brings up the legend of a village where lunch breaks are allowed, but no one believes them. It sounds too much like heresy. At the end of the day, the monks appear to collect their tithe, a generous helping of whatever's grown, and a not-so-generous portion of rumours, confessions and complaints. You hand over your best turnip, try to avoid eye contact, and hope your encouragement was up to par. In return, you might receive a few kind words, a nod of approval, and maybe a vague promise that your soul is in slightly better standing. By dusk, you stumble back to your hut, covered in enough mud to qualify as a living fossil. You collapse by the fire, feet aching, hands raw, and mind blank. There's no job satisfaction survey, just the quiet pride of having survived another day of doing whatever it is you did. And tomorrow, you'll wake and do it all again. Because in the missing millennium, work isn't about purpose or progress, it's about persistence. And, sometimes, finding a carrot, gossip is delivered by shouting across muddy streets or scribbling vague complaints in Latin. Rumours swirl about forbidden cheeses, missing saints, and who secretly learn to read. It's less like social media, more like a very slow, unreliable group text where only the Vatican gets to moderate. You wake each morning to the background hum of speculation. Before the rooster crows, there's already a neighbour leaning out a window, ready to trade half-remembered tidbits for a scrap of actual news, or at least for something juicier than porridge. News here is a living, breathing thing, constantly morphing as it passes from ear to muddy ear. "Did you hear about the baker's son?" Someone whispers. He saw a man with shoes from the next village, shoes with laces. Cue collective gasps and frantic whispering. A scandal involving laces could easily last the week. Rumours are the social glue of the village, more reliable than any calendar and far more entertaining. At market, someone might whisper about a goat that gave birth to twins with matching spots. A sign, perhaps, or just a statistical oddity, but either way, a reason to linger by the turnip cart and speculate about curses, miracles, or the prospect of extra cheese. Every now and then, gossip takes the form of a carefully folded piece of parchment, anonymous, naturally, slipped beneath a church door or tucked into the wheel of the mill. These handwritten updates are always in a Latin so sketchy it might as well be code. The monks, tasked with investigating, pretend not to care, but their sudden interest in attending market day suggests otherwise. Sometimes, the messages contain elaborate accusations that someone has been adding herbs to the soup, unblessed, or worse, hoarding salt. Learning to read is considered both suspicious and impressive. Anyone caught squinting at a piece of parchment for too long is sure to become the subject of at least 3 competing rumours. They're consorting with the devil, they're hiding a love letter, or, most scandalous of all, they're trying to calculate their own taxes. If you possess a book, you'd better hide it carefully, or claim it's just recipes. Even then, people will assume you're plotting something, or at the very least, aiming to invent a new kind of bread. Sometimes, the gossip gets religious. Did the priest actually see Saint Unverifiable in the fog? Did the relic disappear because it was a miracle? Or because the church mouse got ambitious again? No one knows, but everyone has an opinion, and by noon, 3 different saints have been credited with saving the grain harvest, none of whom existed the week before. Gossip is also the first line of defense against boredom. When the chores are done, or done enough, villagers gather by the well to trade the latest tales. Someone always claims to have seen a travelling merchant, a mysterious knight, or, best of all, a messenger from the king, though none of these figures ever seem to leave any physical evidence behind. Still, their presence lingers in whispered conversations, passed down like family heirlooms, gaining new details with every telling. Sometimes, the rumours are oddly practical. Who has extra firewood? Who found a lost sheep? Who actually knows how to fix the millstone without summoning a monk? These small morsels of information move faster than any proclamation, and are usually much more accurate. If you ever want to test your popularity, just leave a basket of bread outside your door. By sunset, half the village will be speculating. Was it charity? Was it a bribe? Or a sign you've finally cracked the secret code of yeast? By nightfall, the real story will be long forgotten, replaced by tales of how you once shared a loaf with a mysterious stranger, possibly a saint, possibly just someone from 3 huts over. And so, the slow churn of gossip is what keeps the lost century connected. A village-wide conversation, as unreliable as it is indispensable. Forget the history books. In the missing millennium, it's the rumors that live forever. Kids run wild, inventing games that mainly involve mud, geese, and hiding from monks. Their education is a crash course in superstition, don't touch that, and ask no questions. Childhood dreams are mostly about inventing a new calendar or escaping to Constantinople. You wake to the unmistakable sound of shrieking, either a game, a disaster, or both. Children in the missing millennium are easy to spot, mud up to the knees, twigs in their hair, and a look of gleeful rebellion in their eyes. You'll find them darting between huts, chasing chickens, and launching pebbles at the village bell, hoping to discover a secret knock that opens a portal to a world where chores are optional and bread comes with honey. No one really knows how many children live in the village at any given moment. They travel in packs, appearing suddenly when food is served and vanishing with equal speed at the first hint of responsibility. The bravest sneak into the monastery's garden, convinced it holds the secrets of eternal life, or at least a stash of forbidden apples. If they're caught, their only punishment is a stern talking to in a language nobody understands, followed by an impromptu lecture on the importance of not questioning authority, or the inventory of the abbot's cheese wheel, whichever is most pressing. Games are mostly improvised, with rules that change according to who's winning. Don't step in the soup is a perennial favourite, as is capture the goose, a sport that the geese invariably win. Some afternoons, the children pretend to be monks, conducting mock processions through the fields, chanting made-up Latin phrases and solemnly blessing each other with handfuls of mud. The adults tolerate these activities with a mixture of nostalgia and concern, mostly concern for the laundry. Formal schooling is rare and usually accidental. Most education is passed down in the form of warnings. Don't play by the well, it's haunted. Or never ever trade bread with the miller's son. Occasionally, a wandering priest tries to teach the alphabet, but his efforts are quickly derailed by questions like, why is X a letter if nobody uses it? And, is it true you can summon rain by spinning around and shouting? The answer to both is, ask your mother, which in this village is the official end to all difficult conversations. Superstition is the real curriculum. Children learn to fear the shadowy corners of the church, to respect the power of cheese left out overnight, and to never insult a goat, no matter how much it looks at you with suspicion. If a cat crosses their path, they immediately spit over their left shoulder and promise to be good for the rest of the week, or at least until supper. If the children dream of the future, it's only in the vaguest terms. Travelling east to Constantinople, where the streets are said to be paved with gold and nobody has to weed the garden, or inventing a calendar that skips all days ending in work. Some claim they'll grow up to be kings, saints, or possibly even someone who can read. The most ambitious hope to be remembered, not in the dusty books of the monastery, but in the whispered legends of next year's children. Bedtime is chaos in miniature. The children vanish at sunset, only to reappear by the hearth with suspiciously clean faces, insisting they've been helping with chores. You tuck them in on straw pallets, surrounded by dreams of daring escapes, mysterious relics, and goose-related heroics. Tomorrow, they'll wake up and do it all again, undaunted by mud, monks, or the ever-changing rules of village life. In a century erased from history, it's the children who keep chaos alive, a little louder, a little messier, and a whole lot more fun. Romance is practical. Someone offers you a slightly less mouldy loaf, and that's courtship. You exchange glances at mass, But if the priest notices, he will add flirtation to the next confession. There are no love letters. Parchment is too valuable. Love is real. But mostly, it's just someone helping you avoid the rats. Forget about serenades under the window or moonlit poetry. Here, wooing someone means sharing a blanket on a cold night, or letting them have the first bite of a surprisingly unburnt root vegetable. If someone brings you an extra turnip, you know it's serious. Marriage proposals are often disguised as practical offers. My family's roof leaks less than yours. Or, I have 3 spoons and a cousin who can fix a fence. Romantic gestures must be subtle. A knowing nod at the well. A smile hidden behind a mug of weak ale. The most daring among you might tuck a wildflower behind someone's ear, but only if you're feeling especially brave, and only if the flower isn't already reserved for the Virgin Mary. Public displays of affection are rare, mostly because the village is small and nothing ever truly stays secret. The local gossips are as persistent as the rats, and far more cunning. Evening gatherings around the fire are the closest thing to a date. You and your intended sit shoulder to shoulder, sharing warmth and a crust of bread, surrounded by family members who pretend not to notice. The conversation is careful. Compliments are practical. Your sheep look robust this year. Or, I noticed your mud wall hasn't collapsed. Swoon. The church, as always, hovers in the background, keen to keep passions under control. Confessions are filled with impure thoughts, which, in this context, might mean anything from holding hands to thinking about holding hands. If the priest catches wind of a budding romance, expect a sermon on chastity, the dangers of excessive eye contact, and why St. Eustace never married. For those who are truly reckless, a stolen kiss in the shadow of the bakery is the height of scandal, but also the stuff of legend. Years later, children will whisper about it, as if you'd flown to Constantinople and back. Weddings, when they happen, are as practical as the courtship. The whole village shows up, partly for the celebration, mostly for the food. The ceremony is brief, vows exchanged, a blessing hastily delivered, and then everyone tucks into the feast. If you're lucky, there's enough ale for everyone to forget that the happy couple will spend their wedding night sweeping up the aftermath. The real honeymoon is finding a bit of privacy away from nosy relatives and the perpetual draft. In marriage, romance evolves into teamwork. One person fetches water, while the other patches the roof. You take turns keeping watch for the neighbour's goats. You share everything: chores, blankets, blame. There are arguments, of course, usually about who misplaced the last edible onion, but disagreements rarely last long. Life is too unpredictable and the winter's too cold for grudges to survive. Reconciliation is a joint effort. Whoever finds the missing sock wins. Over time, love deepens not through grand declarations, but through 1,000 tiny acts of kindness. A warm meal saved from the stew pot. A kind word when the harvest fails. A shared joke about the abbot's increasingly alarming sermons. You grow older together, your laughter blending with the creaks of the house and the clucking of the chickens outside. So, in this forgotten century, romance may be a little rough around the edges, but it's honest, persistent, and just as real as anything in the history books. As you drift off to sleep, you realize that true love here isn't written in poetry or carved in stone. It's built, one day at a time, out of shared struggle and quiet companionship. And sometimes, a slightly less mouldy loaf. A sneeze could mean anything: the Black Death, a common cold, or just a poorly ventilated monastery. The local doctor prescribes prayer, garlic, and maybe a leech. If you survive, congratulations, you get to keep living in a century nobody will remember. Getting sick here is a community event. The moment someone coughs, a small crowd gathers, half out of concern, half because they're bored and have already discussed the state of the mud for the day. No one is exactly sure what to do, but everyone has an opinion. The blacksmith recommends hot wine. The baker swears by stale bread and onion poultices. Your neighbour once heard a monk say that illness is cured by reciting psalms backwards, but she can't remember which ones, so she hums Ave Maria and hopes for the best. The local healer is a person of mystery, arriving with a sack full of questionable remedies, dried roots, oily ointments, maybe an alarming number of feathers. Diagnoses are delivered with the confidence of someone who's read half a book and listened to a lot of rumors. You've got bad humors, the healer might say, or possibly worms, maybe both. The prescription is always the same: rest, garlic if you have it, a handful of dandelions, and just in case, a leech. You agree to the leech, mostly to avoid a lecture on the importance of balanced phlegm. Medicine in the missing millennium is equal parts faith, folklore, and improvisation. There's no such thing as germ theory. Instead, blame falls squarely on cold air, angry spirits, or, most conveniently, outsiders. If the illness lingers, a priest is summoned to sprinkle holy water and mutter urgent prayers. This works just as well as the leeches, which is to say, it mostly gives everyone something to do while waiting for the fever to pass. Some remedies are more elaborate. Sick children might be wrapped in cabbage leaves and placed near the fire, while adults are sent outside to get some air, even in the middle of winter. If a rash appears, it is displayed for public consultation, with every passing neighbour offering advice. Definitely the plague, says one. Just excitement, says another. Should have eaten more turnips, concludes a third, who happens to be in the turnip business. Plagues, when they come, are the stuff of legend and terror. If too many people sneeze at once, panic sets in. Bells ring, doors are barred, and everyone becomes an amateur epidemiologist overnight. The monastery draws up lists of sins, hoping that confession will halt the spread, while villagers burn handfuls of herbs and make ambitious promises to behave better, at least until the next feast day. Survival becomes a lottery, and if you pull through, you get bragging rights and maybe a small loaf of commemorative bread. Of course, most illnesses are less dramatic: stubbed toes, splinters, and a mysterious Tuesday headache that can only be cured by skipping chores. These minor inconveniences are met with the medieval equivalent of walk it off. If your cold lingers, it's probably because you haven't been praying hard enough, or because the local goose gave you the evil eye. Either way, no sick days are allowed. Work waits for no plague. In the rare moments when everyone is healthy, there's a quiet sense of triumph, as if you've outwitted history itself. You swap stories about miraculous recoveries, like the time old Bernard survived a fever thanks to his wife's onion soup and the protective power of her glare. You go to sleep thankful that today's sneezes were only minor, and that the local leeches get to rest for another night. Here in the missing millennium, every cough is a mystery, every ache a small adventure. You survive by luck, faith, and sheer stubbornness, a combination strong enough to keep the centuries rolling, even if nobody ever writes your name down. A wandering bard strums a few uncertain chords. The tune is suspiciously similar to last year's harvest chant. Lyrics are improvised, mostly about bread. Every song ends abruptly with, "and then the fog rolled in." Somehow, it's still better than modern pop. Music here is less a formal art and more a background hum to daily life, a communal soundtrack performed by anyone brave enough to sing with a questionable sense of pitch. The only real instrument is whatever can survive mud and medieval handling. Battered lutes, pipes whittled from whatever wood isn't being burned for warmth, and the ever-popular slapping two pieces of firewood together for rhythm. If you can't play an instrument, you can always hum, clap, or simply bang the dinner pot for percussion. The village's official songbook is a collection of rumours and half-remembered verses, passed from one forgetful performer to the next. Songs start with grand intentions: a hymn to the sunrise, a ballad for lost love, a lament for the vanished king, but always drift back to the usual topics: turnips, rain, and how much bread is left in the pantry. A rousing chorus of "our best goat ran away, but we got him back, sort of," is a perennial favourite, although nobody agrees on the second verse. When bards travel between villages, their main currency is novelty. If you know 3 chords and a story about a cheese wheel, "You'll never sleep in a cold barn." The audience listens, rapt, partly for the entertainment, partly for the chance to correct the lyrics based on family tradition or sheer stubbornness. That's not how it goes. Someone will inevitably shout. My grandmother sang it different, and she knew the words. Debate ensues. The song is restarted, and by the time it ends, the only consensus is that the fog has, indeed, rolled in. Not all music is for entertainment. Work songs are vital. They keep hands moving and minds occupied during endless chores. There's a tune for sowing seeds, another for stomping mud, and a special, slightly desperate melody reserved for chasing geese out of the church. The lyrics, of course, are endlessly adaptable, allowing for new verses about the weather, the harvest, or that time someone dropped the cheese in the well. Religious music dominates on holy days. The monks have their own chants, solemn, haunting, and sung in Latin so garbled that nobody, not even the monks, knows what's being said. Villagers try to join in, but inevitably drift into their own familiar tunes. The result is a beautiful, chaotic jumble, proof that music, like faith, is best when shared with enthusiasm and minimal concern for accuracy. Children invent songs on the spot, often about things only children find interesting. Mud, frogs, and the mysterious noises from the hayloft. Their concerts are less about melody and more about volume. If you manage to sit through a performance without laughing, or being splattered with something, you deserve a round of applause and a nap. Dancing, meanwhile, is optional but encouraged. Especially if you're trying to keep warm, most steps are improvised. If you don't know the moves, just wave your arms, stomp your feet, and pretend you're driving away evil spirits. In the missing millennium, the only bad dancer is the one who stays seated. Evenings often end with the entire household gathered by the hearth, the bard softly strumming and everyone humming along. The melodies may change, the lyrics fade in and out, but the sense of comfort is eternal. It's not about perfection, it's about joining in, making a joyful noise, and sharing a story that will drift through the centuries, as foggy and mysterious as the lost years themselves. So you drift off to sleep with a song half remembered, lyrics unfinished, and the soothing certainty that even in a forgotten age, music endures, simple, heartfelt, and always, somehow, about bread. Every day is a festival, a mass, or a fast, but nobody is quite sure which. Saints appear and disappear with alarming frequency, and every ceremony is heavy on incense, short on clarity. You stand, kneel, or genuflect at random, hoping for the best. The first thing you notice upon waking is the sound of bells, mournful, hopeful, possibly a warning, possibly just the monks reminding everyone that time is passing, or not. You shuffle into the church, dodging chickens and over-enthusiastic altar boys, only to realize that today's service might be for St. Ethelbert the Invisible. Or perhaps it's just Wednesday. The calendar is a rumor. The only certainty is that someone, somewhere, is probably fasting. The priest, dressed in layers of mystery and moth-eaten velvet, lights enough incense to cloud the front pews in a holy haze. He begins in Latin, shifts to the local dialect, and then, possibly out of habit, invents a new language for the closing prayer. No one complains. Everyone's too busy counting how many times they have to cross themselves before breakfast. The old ladies in the front row have mastered the art of blending prayer with subtle naps. On feast days, the entire village comes alive with activity, though the purpose of the festival is often forgotten. Is this the celebration of St. Barbara the Untraceable, or the anniversary of the time the abbot's cat was rescued from the bell tower? It hardly matters. There will be singing, bread, and just enough ale to make even the shyest villager consider dancing. Banners are hastily thrown up, sometimes with the saint's name spelled 3 different ways, just in case. Fasting, on the other hand, sneaks up on you. You arrive at the table only to discover that today, all meals are to be consumed in silence, and the main course is humility. The children eye the turnip stew with suspicion, and the adults try to look grateful for boiled water. The truly devout add a dash of penitence, which tastes remarkably like nothing at all. Someone, inevitably, remembers too late and has to perform extra prayers to make up for an accidental nibble of cheese. Saints themselves come and go as the centuries drift. Some have impressive legends. Saint Gertrude of the Lost Shoes, Saint Marius the mildly disorganized. New ones are invented whenever a miracle is needed, usually to explain why the bread didn't rise or how the village survived last year's exceptionally muddy summer. Statues are carved, then recarved, then quietly whisked away when it turns out the saint in question was just the baker's cousin who once found a four-leaf clover. Confession is part social event, part local news hour. You wait your turn in a line that doubles as the village's unofficial rumour mill. Once inside, the priest listens with the patience of someone who's heard every sin imaginable twice. Your confessions are modest. I coveted my neighbour's goose. I thought uncharitable things about the cheese. I questioned the official date of Lent. Penance is prescribed with a sigh and the hope that you'll remember it longer than the saints themselves. Processions wander through the streets at least once a month, led by a slightly bewildered choir and an enthusiastic band of children, swinging censers and banging whatever can pass for a drum. The route is always uncertain. Last month, the festival of St. Petronilla ended up in the blacksmith's shed, mostly by accident, but everyone agreed it was a blessed turn of events. Through it all, faith weaves its way into every corner of daily life. Whether you're lighting a candle, joining a midnight vigil, or just hoping for a miracle to fix your leaky roof, you find comfort in the rituals, even if nobody is quite sure what or who is being celebrated. And so you stand, kneel, genuflect, and sometimes yawn, swept up in the smoky, uncertain rhythm of devotion. In the missing millennium, the only real miracle is that everyone remembers when to go home for supper. Your pet is whatever animal wanders in. Dogs, cats, a goose with attitude, or possibly a holy relic. Rats run the pantry. Mice sometimes get invited to dinner by mistake. If it has fur and can't recite scripture, it's probably safe. In the missing millennium, the line between pet and pest is flexible, often decided by whoever gets to the bread first. The family dog is less a pampered companion and more a furry security system, forever hopeful that someone will drop a chunk of cheese or spill the soup. The village cat, meanwhile, divides her time equally between sleeping on questionable textiles, staring disdainfully at you from the rafters, and launching daring midnight raids against the mouse population. Not that the mice mind. Some nights, they seem to outnumber the humans and are twice as polite at the dinner table. Occasionally, a stray goat wanders in, takes a nap by the hearth, and leaves just as suddenly, sometimes with half your breakfast tucked under its chin. Nobody minds too much. The goat has as much right to the house as anyone else. After all, it's been blessed by the abbot twice and once ate part of a holy banner, so it might technically count as a relic. Arguments break out about whether the chicken that laid 3 eggs in one day is a sign of good fortune or an omen of another rainy season. The answer, as always, is both, probably. Children, of course, make friends with anything that moves, whether it's a beetle, a stray lamb, or an unusually bold frog. Their pockets jingle with tiny treasures, a shiny snail shell, a feather, the world's stickiest stick. You smile as they parade their finds through the house, trailing mud, delight, and the occasional trail of confused ants. The pantry is a battleground in the eternal war against rats. These are not ordinary rats. They are shrewd, well-fed, and occasionally rumoured to possess the ability to open small doors. If you leave your bread uncovered, expect it to vanish overnight, with only a few polite crumbs as a calling card. Mice are less ambitious, mostly sticking to crumbs and the art of surprise appearances. Sometimes they pop out during dinner, joining the conversation with squeaks of agreement whenever someone complains about the state of the cheese. On feast days, the house feels even more alive. The smells of roasting and baking draw every animal within sniffing distance. Cats slink underfoot, hoping for a dropped bone, while the dog sits by your chair, projecting an air of desperate hope. The goose, always the boldest, flaps up onto the table to snatch a particularly interesting bit of cabbage, launching a short-lived but dramatic chase around the room. The family laughs, the monks frown, and the goat takes the opportunity to chew on something that definitely wasn't meant to be eaten. Some pets, if you can call them that, are harder to love. Spiders spin webs in corners with the quiet confidence of seasoned decorators. You pretend they're keeping away worse things, and most of the time, that's true. Flies are a seasonal annoyance, but everyone agrees that their buzzing is the price you pay for fresh air and open windows. In the end, the medieval household is a jumble of creatures, each playing their part in the gentle chaos of daily life. There's no pet store, no fancy collars or engraved tags, just a constant parade of paws, claws, feathers, and the occasional halo of rumor and legend. The animals keep you company, warm your toes, guard your bread, and sometimes even listen to your worries when nobody else is awake. And so, as the fire crackles and the mice settle in for the night, you tuck yourself under your blanket, grateful for the small warmth of a furry friend, or, at the very least, the knowledge that if you're ever truly alone, you probably just haven't looked under the table. The market offers turnips, turnip-shaped bread, and the occasional relic for a bargain. Prices are set by the local abbot and change without notice. No one remembers who invented the receipt. You wake on market day to the cheerful chaos of voices outside. The whole village is already bustling, children darting between stalls, dogs chasing each other under tables, and someone shouting about a miraculous two-headed carrot. The square itself is a muddy patchwork of carts, baskets, and hopeful sellers, all vying for your attention with goods that are, at best, described as local. The air smells of fresh earth, smoked fish, and the kind of cheese that could double as a medieval weapon. As you wander past the stalls, you see turnips in every size, shape, and shade of slightly alarming purple. There's a baker offering turnip loaf, which is either bread with a hint of turnip or turnip with a hint of bread. It's best not to ask. On the next table sits a relic, an old iron key with a suspiciously convenient story. Belonged to St. Oswald's cousin, the vendor insists, guaranteed to keep away bad luck, mice, and the taxman. You're tempted, mostly by the last promise. Bartering is the language of the land. Coins are rare, and no one seems to agree on their actual value. You might trade 3 eggs and a firm handshake for a basket of beets, or offer to help the potter fix his roof in exchange for a new mug. Occasionally, someone tries to pay with a story or a song, and if the mood is right, that's just as good as silver. The abbot, of course, keeps careful watch over his own stall, jars of honey, blessed candles, and mysterious powders labelled for important occasions only. Nobody dares haggle with the abbot. Prices fluctuate hourly, depending on the weather, the mood of the livestock, and how recently the abbot has sneezed. There are no written records, just a lot of shouting and the occasional scuffle over the last slightly fresh apple. If you ask for a receipt, you'll get a blank stare, or perhaps a dirty scrap of parchment with a doodle of a turnip, your official proof of purchase. Every market has its regulars. The loud fishmonger whose freshest catch was caught sometime last week, the herbalist peddling cures for invisible ailments, and the tinker selling mysterious bits of ironwork he swears are essential household innovations. If you're lucky, the travelling merchant rolls in with silk, spices, or a story from the outside world. You linger near his cart, dreaming of saffron, imagining life in distant lands, and deciding, ultimately, to buy another turnip. Shopping is as much a social ritual as a necessity. News travels by whispers between stalls, secrets are exchanged over sacks of grain, and the latest rumours spread faster than the scent of frying onions. If you want to know who's in charge, who's in trouble, or who's hiding a stash of real bread, the market is the place to listen. Gossip is free with every purchase, and the most popular stalls are those that offer both food and entertainment. A juggler here, a storytelling shepherd there, a goat doing something improbable in the background. Haggling is an art form. Every negotiation is a dance. 2 for 1, 1 for 3, I'll throw in a chicken if you stop singing. Nobody wins and nobody loses. But everyone goes home feeling like they got the better deal. As the sun sets and the market winds down, people begin to pack up their unsold goods and count their blessings, or, more accurately, their turnips. You head home with a basket that's heavier than your wallet but lighter than your hopes. As you trudge through the muddy lanes, you're already planning your next market day strategy. Less talking, more turnips, and, maybe one day, a real receipt to prove you were ever here at all. In the missing millennium, the market is both a memory and a miracle, a place where time stands still, and bargains, like the years, are always up for negotiation. You set out for the next village, but the roads loop back or end at suspiciously quiet monasteries. Maps are rare, and mostly wrong. If you see a signpost, it's in a language nobody reads. You're better off staying home. At least you know where the cheese is. It's a misty morning and, inspired by equal parts boredom and rumour, you decide it's time for a grand journey, a trek of at least 2 miles, or as it's known in local legend, the edge of the world. You pack your sturdy walking stick, a bit of bread, and a handful of hope, waving goodbye to your neighbour who promises to water the turnips and watch for your return by next harvest. The path begins well enough, following a rut so deep it's practically a family heirloom. But soon it branches, curves, and disappears into a thicket that didn't exist last year. You try to follow the river, but the river seems equally lost, meandering away into reeds and fog, mumbling to itself about the good old days when it was easier to get to the abbey. Every so often, you stumble upon a signpost. It's carved with symbols that might be Latin, or could be a warning about unusually aggressive squirrels. You squint, try to remember your letters, and finally decide it's best to ask directions. The only person you meet is a shepherd who claims you're already in the next village, or maybe you've circled back to the start. He points vaguely north and wishes you luck. You walk in the opposite direction, just in case. The concept of maps is exciting in theory, but in practice, the only map in the village is an old scrap of parchment showing a river, 2 hills, and something that might be a dragon or a poorly drawn cow. The monks update it occasionally, usually after someone gets lost for 3 days and stumbles home with a story about a haunted tree. None of the roads match the map, but that's part of the fun. Getting lost is tradition, almost a rite of passage. Some folks claim it's the best way to find adventure, or at least to avoid chores for an afternoon. You pass a crossroads where the local legend says a knight once got stuck in the mud and gave up on questing forever. There's no plaque, just a suspiciously shiny spot in the dirt, and a story that grows with every telling. As you wander on, the scenery blurs, fields giving way to tangled forests, stone ruins hinting at civilizations even more confused than your own. Every clearing seems both familiar and utterly new, as if the landscape itself is gently gaslighting you. Lunch is a dry crust of bread, eaten while perched on a suspicious rock. You check the sun's position, try to gauge how far you've come, and realize you haven't actually left sight of your village's steeple. It's comforting and a little disappointing. A passing merchant assures you the next village is just over that hill. But hills have a tendency to multiply when you're on foot. Before you know it, you've circled back to the place you started, passing the same cheerful goat who watched you leave hours ago, now looking smug. Travelers' tales in the tavern always sound more impressive than the reality. Stories of distant towns, exotic markets, and miraculous shortcuts that only work if you're at least slightly lost already. Some brave souls claim to have reached the coast, the great city, or even Rome. Most of them eventually admit they just got turned around and ended up at a different side of the same field, but no one holds it against them. The journey is the point. So you trudge home, shoes muddy, legs sore, appetite sharpened by fresh air, and a generous helping of confusion. You return with the triumphant sense that, while you may not have conquered new lands, you've at least mastered the art of wandering. And when you sit by your own hearth that night, cheese safely within reach, you realize. In the missing millennium, every road leads home eventually, even if you have to ask the goose for directions. Feeling sick? The healer arrives with a bucket of leeches and a prayer book. Nobody is sure if the cure is worse than the disease. The only prescription is, don't ask questions, and maybe a quick trip to the confessional. If you start to sneeze or develop a suspicious cough, the entire village takes notice. Advice comes at you from every direction. Drink more water. Rub a turnip on your forehead. Sleep facing east, just in case. But the real authority is the healer, whose credentials include a collection of alarming hats, the confidence to pronounce Latin words incorrectly, and the ability to keep a straight face while recommending boiled moss. The healer's toolkit is impressive, if you like surprises. There are jars of mysterious powders, bundles of dried herbs, vials of pungent oils, and, of course, the ever-present leeches. Leeches for headaches, leeches for back pain, leeches for melancholy, leeches for general suspiciousness. The medical theory is simple. If it worked once, it must be a miracle. If not, you clearly didn't pray hard enough. Your symptoms are quickly diagnosed. Fever? Definitely bad humours. Aching joints? Excess wind? A weird rash? Sins of your ancestors, probably. The treatment process begins with a blessing, continues with the liberal application of garlic, and almost always includes the cheerful suggestion that things will look better after a few days in bed, assuming the cat hasn't claimed it first. For anything truly mysterious, there's the confessional. Many ailments are blamed on impure thoughts, slacking off during Lent, or forgetting to tip the abbot at last market day. A good confession might do wonders, especially if it's followed by an enthusiastic dousing in holy water. Afterward, you're sent home with stern instructions not to climb ladders, not to eat cheese on Wednesdays, and never, ever, to question the healer's methods. Pharmacies, as a concept, do not exist. Remedies are gathered from fields, forests, and the odd corner of the monk's herb garden. Chamomile is for nerves, nettle for strength, and mint for everything else, because it grows faster than anyone can stop it. If you run out of ideas, a particularly determined old woman swears by putting onions in your socks and sleeping with your head facing the nearest church. "It worked for my cousin's cousin's ox," she assures you, and who are you to argue? Surgical procedures are, thankfully, rare. If something needs removing, it's done quickly, with a knife that's seen more cheese than flesh, and everyone involved prays the patient is sturdy. Recovery is measured in weeks, or by how quickly you can return to the fields, whichever comes first. Most people survive through sheer willpower and an uncanny ability to ignore pain, or at least to distract themselves with bread. The healer is also a master of distraction. A little story here, a song there, and before you know it, you've forgotten why you were worried in the first place. You're sent home with a pouch of fragrant herbs and a list of things not to do, chiefly, don't let the rats eat this, and don't ask where the leeches go after. Oddly enough, most people recover. Maybe it's faith, maybe it's luck, or maybe it's the fact that you're more likely to rest when everyone is fussing over you. Either way, you eventually find yourself back at the hearth, regaling friends with tales of your miraculous survival and the curious feeling that you now owe a leech a favour. And so, in the missing millennium, you trust the healer, accept the leeches, and remember to pray a little harder next time you sneeze. Medicine may be a guessing game, but the real cure is knowing you're surrounded by people who care enough to offer advice, even if it sometimes comes with teeth. Night falls, and the only entertainment is watching villagers debate the existence of tomorrow. Someone starts dancing with a chair. The official song is, "It's dark, but we're not sure why." You join in, mostly because there's nothing else to do. Once the last bit of light seeps away, the village changes tempo. Candles are lit, sparingly, because beeswax is practically currency, and the fire becomes the center of gravity for everyone who hasn't already collapsed into their straw bed. The whole household shuffles closer to the hearth, chasing warmth, comfort, and any chance of hearing the latest story, even if it's about a goose who once looked suspiciously at the abbot's shoes. If you step outside, the world is more shadows than scenery. The paths you know by day dissolve into uncertainty, and the sky above seems impossibly vast. Night is when the frogs and crickets take over, making more music than any bard, while the old dog sighs contentedly and the goats murmur in their sleep. You're not entirely sure what's lurking in the darkness, but you suspect it's either friendly or at least uninterested in people who can't dance. Inside, the night's entertainment is whatever the collective imagination can conjure. Someone produces a battered lute and strums a tune nobody can quite remember, inventing verses as they go. The chair dancing, begun as a joke, escalates into a proper event. Villagers clap along, laughing harder than the joke really deserves. You try your hand at chair dancing, discover you have no natural talent, and are awarded a turnip anyway for effort. The main event is always a debate, tonight's topic. Is tomorrow even real, or is it just a clever trick? Opinions fly, arguments drift in and out of logic, and by the end, the only thing everyone agrees on is that more bread should be baked next week. The children contribute their theories, involving magical cats and a secret sun hidden under the monastery, while the elders nod wisely and declare that time is a circle or a flatbread, depending on who's talking. Games are improvised and depend heavily on available props. Some nights it's who can make the best animal noise. On others, guess what's in this bag? The answer is always turnips. If the weather is foul, you'll hear ghost stories, tales of saints, lost travellers, and the ancient rumour that the abbot's candle never truly goes out. The line between horror and comedy is as blurry as the candlelight. Food, of course, plays a role. Bowls of thin soup are passed around, with occasional excitement when someone finds an actual vegetable. If there's ale or cider, spirits rise, tongues loosen, and someone inevitably suggests a toast to something, usually survival, or the cheese that didn't go mouldy this week. If you're lucky, a traveller or wandering monk will pass through, bringing news of the outside world, fresh stories, and maybe a new game. Their tales are always suspiciously grand, involving lost cities, dragons, or at the very least a village where the beds are made of actual feathers. For a moment, everyone leans in, eyes wide, with the hope that somewhere, somehow, there's a world where tomorrow is not just another day to mend fences. As the embers fade, people drift away, content from the laughter, the bread, and the small miracles of ordinary company. There are no clocks to watch, no curfews to break, and no urgent reason to sleep. Except that tomorrow, real or imagined, the chores will still be waiting. So you tuck yourself in, the echoes of laughter and chair legs scraping in your mind. Nightlife, in the missing millennium, isn't about what you celebrate. It's about that you celebrate, together, in the soft glow of firelight, gently debating the mystery of morning, and quietly daring tomorrow to arrive. The tax collector is back, and this year he's collecting for 3 different popes. You pay in turnips, prayers, and the hope he'll forget your address. Everyone suspects the real king is the guy with the biggest sack of potatoes. Tax season is less a date on the calendar and more a recurring bad dream, one that arrives without warning, usually when your pantry is emptiest and your patience is thinnest. The collector makes his entrance with all the subtlety of a marching band, dressed in mismatched robes and weighed down by a suspiciously well-fed purse. He claims to represent the king, the bishop, and occasionally a distant cousin who once married into royalty. Each one, apparently, requires a cut of your very humble pie. You line up with your neighbours, clutching offerings, a handful of eggs, a lump of butter, the saddest-looking turnip you could find, and a coin so worn it might actually be a pebble. Receipts are rare, but if you're lucky, you'll get a mumbled blessing and a vague promise that the Lord sees your generosity. If you ask for an itemized bill, you'll be met with a look of disbelief, followed by a lecture on the virtue of trust. No one is ever quite sure what happens to the taxes once they leave the village. Some say they go to build cathedrals. Others swear it's just to keep the local bishop's table full. A few conspiratorial souls believe the entire thing is a racket run by the abbot and the village's most persuasive goose. All you know is that every year, the demands increase. Last year, it was a bushel of barley and 2 heartfelt prayers. This year, it's barley prayers and a detailed list of your dreams for the afterlife. If you fall behind, the collector offers payment plans that sound suspiciously like threats. Just a little more next season, he says, as if next season will be any kinder. There's talk of debtors' benches, where you sit, publicly shamed, until someone in your family can negotiate your freedom with a particularly good cheese or a song that flatters the bishop's taste in hats. The village learns to get creative. The children put on plays about generous saints. The elders attempt to pass off turnip soup as rare medicinal broth. Everyone hopes the collector's memory is as poor as his handwriting. Sometimes the tax is more spiritual than material. You're asked to say extra prayers, attend extra services, or fast for the good of the kingdom. It's hard to tell if this is true piety or just a clever way to get you to eat less. Either way, your knees ache and your stomach grumbles, but at least you can claim a little tax relief in the afterlife. As for the real king, no one has actually seen him. The only evidence of his rule is the increasingly elaborate signatures at the bottom of each tax order. You start to suspect that anyone with a quill and a flair for dramatic flourishes could demand tribute, and most of the village agrees that the real seat of power is the potato seller. Whoever controls the winter root vegetables controls the fate of the realm. By the end of tax day, you've given away half your larder and 3 of your most promising turnips, plus a vow to attend next week's mass. You go home lighter, hungrier, but quietly relieved that, for now, you've escaped the collector's notice for another season. You tuck your remaining potatoes under the bed and whisper a prayer to Saint Escapio, patron saint of creative accounting. And so, in the missing millennium, taxes are as constant as mud, as mysterious as relics, and as inescapable as tomorrow's chores. Still, you survive, year after year, comforted by the hope that somewhere, deep in the vaults of the monastery, a dusty ledger holds your name, next to a drawing of a very satisfied potato. Floods, fires, random acts of confusion. Every day is a crisis. Solutions range from wait for the fog to lift to maybe check with the monks. You build a raft, just in case. But nobody knows where the river leads. In the missing millennium, disaster preparedness is a lifestyle, not a plan. Each season brings its own lottery of minor catastrophes. Spring arrives with melting snow and swollen rivers, turning the village lanes into a network of mud traps. You own 1 pair of shoes, now mud-caked, possibly growing moss. Neighbors gather to discuss the latest rumor. Is this the big flood, or just the regular one that washes away the turnip patch? Someone claims they saw a fish swimming in the garden. Everyone nods sagely and fetches buckets. Fires are a perennial favorite. Thatched roofs and open flames make for an exciting combination. If the alarm is raised, usually in the form of someone running past, waving their arms and shouting, "Not again," the entire village springs into action. Buckets are filled, prayers are whispered, and the fire is fought with an impressive combination of determination and confusion. When the smoke clears, you count your blessings and your spoons, only to realize the goat has moved into the newly vacated kitchen. And then there's famine. Some years, the harvest simply doesn't happen. The weather is blamed, the saints are petitioned, and everyone tries very hard not to mention that one time the village dog dug up the seed potatoes. Meals become more creative, with turnip stew giving way to turnip soup, turnip surprise, and, at the lowest point, just turnips. The abbot assures everyone this is an opportunity for spiritual growth. The village agrees, while quietly rationing the last bit of cheese and dreaming of Constantinople. Not all disasters are grand. Sometimes it's the little things. The cow escapes and leads a chase through the churchyard. The millstone cracks at the busiest time of year. Or someone mistakes soap for cheese, causing a culinary disaster that's talked about for weeks. Mondays, especially, are prone to this kind of chaos. Nobody is ever quite sure why. Some blame bad luck. Others suspect it's just the universe's way of keeping everyone humble. Official responses to disaster are a blend of practicality and hope. The monks are consulted for wisdom and occasionally for actual help, but their main strategy is prayer and the distribution of a mysterious herbal tonic that tastes suspiciously like water. Village meetings are held in the largest, driest hut available, with the same 4 ideas recycled every time. Build a bigger ditch, move the goats uphill, and, if all else fails, wait for the fog to lift and pretend nothing happened. Despite the constant threat of calamity, there's a kind of comfort in the routine. Everyone has a role to play, from hauling buckets to consoling children to counting supplies by candlelight. Humor becomes the secret weapon. Jokes about soggy bread, heroic chickens, and last year's incident make the rounds, keeping spirits afloat. There's a stubborn pride in surviving, even when survival means nothing more than making it through another muddy, mildly disastrous Monday. After every crisis, the village pulls together to repair, rebuild, and retell the story with a few extra flourishes. You dry your socks by the fire, patch the holes in the roof, and tuck away the raft for another season, just in case. The next disaster is always lurking, but so is the next miracle, usually disguised as a warm loaf of bread or a sunrise without rain. So you settle in for the night, grateful that today's disasters were only mildly catastrophic and that, through luck, stubbornness, and the occasional floating goat, you've survived another day in the world's most forgetful millennium. Step on a crack, and someone insists on a chicken sacrifice. The line between bad luck and divine punishment is blurry at best. You never whistle indoors, and every missing object is blamed on invisible saints. In the missing millennium, daily life is a delicate dance through a maze of unwritten rules, whispered warnings, and ancient fears. Everyone knows not to leave a broom standing upside down, not to sweep after sunset, and not to lend a pot on a Tuesday, unless you want all your butter to turn sour and your turnips to sprout legs and run away. These aren't just old wives' tales. They are the unofficial village constitution. Children are taught superstition before they even learn to count. The first lesson: never walk under a ladder, especially if it's leaning against the church. The second lesson: always carry a lucky pebble in your pocket and touch it before speaking to anyone who owns more than 3 goats. For extra protection, spit over your left shoulder if you see a black cat, a red-haired monk, or anyone whistling the wrong tune. Goats are considered both a blessing and a curse. If your goat sneezes 3 times before breakfast, it's a sign that you'll have good luck. Unless, of course, you have an odd number of eggs in the pantry, in which case you should wear your shoes on the opposite feet until sunset. The system is complicated, but everyone agrees it works, mostly because no one has dared do otherwise. Church bells aren't just for telling time. They're rung to chase away storms, scare off evil spirits, and remind everyone that yes, it's probably time to start worrying about something new. If lightning strikes the belfry, the whole village gathers to recount every possible sin of the week, searching for the culprit who angered the heavens by forgetting to bless their porridge. Lost objects are the favourite playground of the invisible saints. Did your best spoon vanish? Saint Misplacio, patron of things that roll under the bed, is at it again. Your left shoe is missing? Clearly the work of Saint Forgetful, who has been known to trade shoes for socks if not properly appeased. The solution is always the same. Light a candle, mutter a prayer, and search for the item while walking backwards and humming the village anthem. Dreams are another matter entirely. A dream about fish means good luck, unless the fish were swimming upstream, which means your bread will fall flat. A nightmare about turnips is just a sign that you ate too late. Any dream involving cheese is to be kept secret and never discussed, for reasons no one will explain. The monks keep dream journals, which they update with wild interpretations and then promptly lose in the archives. Some superstitions are oddly helpful. If you forget someone's name, you can blame the name-thieving spirit and simply refer to everyone as friend. until the next festival. If you trip on the church steps, you must immediately tie a piece of string around your wrist and vow to avoid poultry for a fortnight. Failure to do so risks inviting the curse of the clucking shadows, which nobody wants to explain but everyone avoids just in case. And then there's whistling. Whistling indoors invites mice. Whistling after sundown wakes the dead. Whistling while wearing a hat guarantees rain for a week. The only safe time to whistle is during the midsummer festival in the field facing east at precisely the moment the church bell rings noon, which, incidentally, has never actually happened. So you live carefully, making small sacrifices to fate and large offerings to humour. Every odd event, every streak of luck, and every lost sock is woven into the invisible tapestry of supernatural cause and effect. You drift to sleep under the watchful eyes of saints, ancestors, and possibly the neighbour's goat, comforted by the thought that, cursed or not, you've survived another superstitious day in a world where everything is magical, especially the things nobody can explain. A neighbour invents the wheel. By morning, it's vanished, possibly confiscated by monks, possibly just rolled into the fog. Progress is like your memory of this century, unreliable and mostly missing. Every so often, the spark of inspiration strikes the village like a lightning bolt, quiet, surprising, and immediately concerning to anyone who prefers their centuries unchanged. The local inventor, often the same person who once tried to teach a duck to read, spends weeks whittling, hammering, or whispering words of encouragement to planks of wood and lumps of clay. It's a revolution, they announce, unveiling their creation in the village square. It's a cart with round bits. For moving things, imagine the possibilities. The crowd gathers in cautious awe. Children immediately claim the wheel as a new toy, rolling it through puddles and over the toes of every adult within 100 yards. The elders stroke their beards and nod solemnly, offering wisdom that sounds suspiciously like, "Back in my day, we didn't need wheels. We had hope and really strong backs." The monks look on with a mix of suspicion and quiet jealousy, already making plans to requisition the wheel for holy business before sundown. There's a brief, shining moment when it seems like everything might change. Maybe this invention will lighten the harvest, or speed up cheese delivery, or just stop the village goat from stealing the laundry. There's talk of building a road, of writing down the plans so no one forgets. The abbot preaches a special sermon on humility, warning of the dangers of too much progress, delivered while subtly eyeing the wheel as if weighing its sacramental value. Then the inevitable happens. The invention disappears. Sometimes it's spirited away by monks for safekeeping, to be studied in the dim, draughty corners of the scriptorium, where all useful things go to become mysterious relics. Sometimes the wheel simply rolls off on its own, following the slope of the village green until it's lost forever in the mist. More often, it's quietly repurposed, broken down for firewood, built into a new stool, or adopted by a local tinker as the core of his next, even more confusing project. Attempts to record the invention's genius are thwarted by a tragic lack of parchment and the universal medieval tendency to spill soup on whatever you're writing. The inventor tries to pass on their knowledge by word of mouth, but the story mutates with every retelling. It was round, but not too round. Made a sound like a singing chicken. Could have changed the world, if only we'd had more rope. By winter, the wheel has become legend, somewhere between fact, fiction, and fever dream. Progress, in the missing millennium, is an elusive guest. Each new idea is met with wonder, quickly followed by caution. Is it magic? Someone whispers. Is it allowed? If the new device works too well, people worry it will upset the saints or make the local pigs jealous. The safest course of action is to admire quietly, then hide it under a blanket until everyone forgets it existed. But the urge to invent never fully disappears. Even in a world allergic to innovation, people keep tinkering. A new way to tie shoes, a faster method for chasing chickens, a slightly improved spoon. The cycle repeats: momentary excitement, rapid disappearance, and a new family story to pass down beside the fire. Someday, someone will try again, with better luck or at least a sturdier hiding place. And as you drift off to sleep, you realize this is what keeps the missing millennium alive. It isn't the vanished inventions or the lost instructions. It's the stubborn hope that tomorrow someone will make something wonderful and, if they're very lucky, remember where they left it. You collapse into bed, a lumpy straw mattress that predates the concept of comfort. As you drift off, you wonder if any of this is real, or if the last 1,000 years are just a story written by the only people allowed to write. You dream of sunlight, of knowledge, of a world where time makes sense, and tomorrow you'll wake up and start the mystery all over again. The medieval night begins not with silence, but with a gentle chorus, the crackle of a smoky hearth, the rustle of mice plotting under the floorboards, and the occasional midnight rooster who doesn't quite understand how clocks or centuries work. Your bed is a marvel of creative engineering, crafted from straw, spare blankets, and an ever-growing list of lumpy surprises. It might have started life as a hay bale or an unsuccessful loaf of bread. The only pillow is your arm, or, if you're especially unlucky, the family cat. Sleep isn't guaranteed. There's no blackout curtain, just a scrap of wool draped over the window and a prayer that the moon isn't feeling nosy tonight. Outside, the world is a soup of fog, shadows, and suspiciously cheerful frogs. Inside, you settle in and begin the ancient ritual, swatting at the one mosquito that always finds you, rearranging the straw to avoid the pointiest spots, and bargaining with your own spine for just a few hours of peace. Before you fall asleep, you replay the day's confusions in your mind. Was it Thursday? Did you actually work in the right field, or was that just last week's field, rotated out of sequence by some ancient scheduling error? Was that wheel a dream? Did you really see the tax collector? Or was it just an unusually aggressive goose? These questions drift through your mind like half-remembered stories, each one tangled with rumor and possibility. Eventually, exhaustion wins. You close your eyes, surrendering to dreams that feel both ancient and new. Your mind wanders to impossible places, a library full of books that haven't been erased, a sun that rises on time, a table set with bread that never molds and cheese that doesn't talk back. You dream of learning to read, to write, to leave a mark that might just last longer than the next festival. Sometimes, you dream of sunlight pouring through a clear window, or of clocks that actually agree on what day it is. And sometimes, your dreams slip into legend. You ride on wheels that never vanish, invent things that never get hidden by monks, and dance with saints who have names you actually remember. In your dreams, every object is accounted for, every festival makes sense, and no one ever loses track of time, not even the rooster. It is a world as perfect and improbable as it is fleeting. But dawn is persistent, and no dream lasts forever. The first light sneaks in through the wool curtain, the mice stage a tactical retreat, and the rooster gives an apologetic crow, either a little early or a little late, as usual. You stretch, yawn, and rise from the straw, ready to greet another day of fog, mystery, and cheerful disarray. Was any of it real? Did you actually sleep, or just time travel for a few hours inside your own mind? In the missing millennium, who can say? You pull on your mismatched shoes, run your fingers through your hair, and prepare to face whatever century today feels like. Whether you remember your dreams or not, you carry a little of their strange comfort with you, the hope that tomorrow will make a little more sense, that someone might finally invent the calendar, and that, perhaps, you'll get a slightly fluffier mattress before another 1,000 years pass. For now, you join the parade of yawning villagers stepping into the morning mist, sleepy, confused, and quietly heroic, simply for making it through another night in a world history tried so hard to forget. Your neighbor claims to have written a letter, but nobody believes him. Parchment is more valuable than most livestock, and the only available ink is yesterday's soup. The village's single quill is locked in the monastery, only to be used for emergencies, saint lists, or the annual debate about whether turnip has two U's. The act of writing is so rare that if you manage it, everyone insists you read it aloud, twice, and then again for the goats. The idea of writing is almost mystical. In a world where most news travels on the wind, in the form of rumours and interpretive gestures, the mere sight of a written word is enough to stop a conversation. If you want to write something down, you must first petition the abbot, who will unlock a small wooden chest with a key so ornate it could be a relic itself. Inside are the tools of the ancient art. One feather, trimmed by a monk with trembling hands, and a pot of ink so thick it might actually be last year's plum jam. Parchment, when you find it, is a marvel. It's made from animal skin, stretched, scraped, and reused so many times it tells more stories than it erases. Most pages are full of faded script, lists of saints, inventories of cheese, or fragments of lost prayers. If you manage to find a clean corner, you write as small as possible, making every letter count. Spelling is creative, grammar is optional. You know your words will outlive your dinner, if not your reputation. For ordinary villagers, the urge to write is both a privilege and a problem. There's so much to say, and so few places to say it. If someone pens a letter to a loved one in another village, it's an event. The entire family gathers around as the precious words are shaped, the lines squashed together, each one cheered or edited by committee. The message is then folded and tucked away until a traveller, or a very trustworthy chicken, can deliver it to its intended recipient, often months or even years later. Official writing is the realm of the monastery. The monks copy holy texts by candlelight, their fingers stained and cramped, pausing only to correct each other's Latin and argue about punctuation. The village's only legal document is the parish record, which consists of names, dates, and the occasional note like possibly a wizard or sings at odd hours. Every so often, the monks compose a new hymn or a sermon so confusing that even they don't understand it upon rereading. The villagers treat the written word with equal parts awe and suspicion. If you find a scrap of parchment on the road, you carry it home like treasure, showing it off at market day. Sometimes you copy the shapes onto a wall with charcoal, hoping to unlock their meaning. Children memorize the alphabet like a spell, repeating the letters until they blend together into a secret song. If you know how to sign your own name, you are both feared and envied, rumoured to possess otherworldly powers, or at least the ability to keep accounts straight. Despite the scarcity, people are always trying to leave their mark. Names carved on tree trunks, messages scratched into the mud, prayers tucked under loose stones, each one a stubborn declaration that you were here, and that, somehow, your story matters. The world may forget the lost century, but it can't erase the urge to write, to record, to send a message into the fog for someone, someday, to find. So as night falls and the firelight flickers on the walls, you pick up a stick, draw your initials in the dust, and imagine a future where words are everywhere. Until then, the rare letter, read aloud to neighbours, goats and ghosts alike, is enough to keep hope alive. In the missing millennium, even a single sentence is a miracle. Rain, fog, and something in between are the standard weather reports. If the sun shines, it's considered suspicious, and the elders gather to argue whether it's a blessing, an omen, or just a sign that someone left a window open. Nobody owns a barometer, but everyone is an expert in predicting disaster based on the direction the chickens are facing. Whatever the forecast, it's best to have a spare cloak, a blessing from the abbot, and at least 3 different stories about the last time the river froze solid. The day begins with the usual inspection. Step outside, sniff the air, and squint at the clouds. Is it drizzle, mist, or just the collective sigh of a village that's lost all hope of drying laundry? The path to the market is already a small stream, and every footstep comes with a satisfying squelch. If you hear the crows cawing, that's a sure sign of rain. If you don't hear them, they're probably hiding from something worse. Weather, here, is less a background detail and more a central character. Every conversation starts with a lament about mud. Good morning. Yes, it's still raining. Or, on rare, clear days, good morning. The sky is... what color is that? If the sun appears, everyone shuffles out of their homes, shading their eyes and whispering in awe, as if witnessing a minor miracle or the sudden appearance of Saint Umbrella. Forecasting is a communal event. The elders convene at the well, each armed with a different technique. One watches the geese. If they're dry, it will rain. If they're wet, it's already too late. Another swears by the ache in his left knee. Children contribute with their own science. Toss a shoe into the air, and if it lands muddy side up, expect more mud. For the truly advanced, there's the sniff test. The art of inhaling deeply and declaring the precise type of fog rolling in, from thick as old cheese to thin as the abbot's excuses. Clothing is less fashion, more survival strategy. You layer everything you own: wool tunic, borrowed cloak, spare socks, the occasional repurposed curtain, because the only constant is the sudden downpour. Umbrellas don't exist. But the largest cabbage leaf you can find works in a pinch. Boots are coveted, but everyone secretly knows that bare feet are the only reliable footwear for mud deep enough to swallow small livestock. Stories about past weather disasters are told with reverence and creative flair. There's the great flood of whenever, when someone claims to have paddled to the monastery on a door, or the day the fog swallowed the baker, who was later found 3 feet away, muttering about giant ducks. Every winter, there's an annual retelling of the time the river froze so solid the cows skated across it, a story that grows more improbable with every year. Coping with the elements is a point of pride. The abbot offers special blessings for dry socks and clear skies, and every household has a secret ritual for keeping the hearth fire lit in a downpour. Some folks hang garlic to ward off thunderstorms. Others simply accept that their roof will leak and place buckets accordingly. Everyone knows that complaining about the weather is as important as breakfast, sometimes more so, depending on how soggy the bread is. As dusk settles in and the clouds gather for another round, you wrap yourself in a blanket, listen to the rain drumming on the thatch, and add your own verse to the endless village song. It's raining again, but at least the river hasn't carried off the goat. And so you drift to sleep, serenaded by the endless forecast, comforted by the knowledge that no matter how many centuries slip away, the weather will always give everyone something to talk about, especially when there's nothing else to do. The idea of art is flexible. If you draw on the wall, it's graffiti, unless the abbot likes it, in which case it's a holy mural. Portraits are rare, unless you count the faces accidentally burned onto bread. Creative expression happens in secret. A carved spoon here, a decorative thatch pattern there, or a tapestry that mostly records the noble adventures of village livestock. The only art critics are the chickens, and they're notoriously hard to please. Making art in the missing millennium is a delicate dance between inspiration and practicality. Paint is more expensive than a goose that lays golden eggs, and the only brush you're likely to find is made from the tail of the least cooperative goat. Most people stick to what's available: charcoal from the hearth, berry juice, or the occasional smear of mud that accidentally takes the shape of Saint Unverifiable's halo. If you're feeling ambitious, you might try to carve something. Wood, bone, and even bread crusts become your canvas. Spoons are the most popular choice. A good carved spoon says everything you need to about love, patience, and how often you lose your other spoon. Some spoons become so elaborate that no one dares use them, not even the abbot. They're displayed on the mantel like trophies, each one telling the story of a particularly long winter or a goose-related incident nobody will ever fully explain. Wall decorations are a tricky business. Children draw what they see: cows, goats, a slightly terrifying interpretation of the bishop's hat, and adults pretend not to notice until the abbot stops by for tea. If he's in a good mood, your scrawl becomes a devotional fresco, and you're praised for your spiritual vision. If not, it's out with the rag and a stern warning about idleness. This makes for a delicate balancing act, especially if you live in a house that doubles as the unofficial chicken coop. Chickens, it turns out, are not shy about adding their own artistic contributions, usually in the form of muddy footprints or suspiciously well-placed feathers. Portraits, in the modern sense, are almost unheard of. On rare occasions, someone tries to sketch a likeness of a beloved family member, but the results are interpretive. "Is that your grandmother?" asks a guest, squinting at the wall. "No, that's the bread," you reply. "Grandmother is next to the bread, under the cat." Everyone nods, as if this explains everything. Textiles are where creativity truly flourishes. Every blanket and tapestry tells a story. The colours of the last festival, the number of sheep lost to fog, or a proud rendering of the legendary turnip harvest of who knows when. If you're lucky, your handiwork survives the winter, although it will definitely be repurposed at some point. Today's tapestry is tomorrow's curtain, and next week's curtain may become part of a goat's wardrobe. Art competitions are informal and judged by the most critical audience in the village. The chickens. Set out a painted pot or a new spoon, and watch to see if the chickens roost on it. If they do, it's clearly a masterpiece. If they ignore it, you try again with more feathers or a touch of old cheese for authenticity. Some villagers swear their best ideas come to them while watching the chickens, who remain unimpressed by everything except the occasional shiny pebble. Through it all, the urge to create never fades. In a world of fleeting memories and lost centuries, every little act of beauty, no matter how humble or absurd, is a quiet rebellion against the fog. Whether it's a mural that survives a season, a carved spoon that sparks a laugh, or a tapestry that wraps a child against the cold, art remains proof that people lived, dreamed, and found time to decorate the mystery. And so you drift towards sleep, comforted by the knowledge that even in the missing millennium, the world was full of colour, sometimes accidental, sometimes deliberate, but always, undeniably, alive. Justice in the missing millennium is swift, confusing, and largely improvised. If you're accused of stealing bread, you'll have to plead your case before the village council, which is just whoever happens to be standing around the fire. Sentences range from public apologies to extra chores, or sometimes just a stern lecture about the virtues of patience. The only real crime is questioning the abbot's hat, and even then, most sentences can be commuted for a generous turnip donation. There are no lawyers, just neighbours with strong opinions, quick memories, and a tendency to exaggerate when the story gets good. The accused stands on a suspiciously creaky plank, surrounded by spectators munching stale bread, all eager to see justice, or at least a good argument, served. The council is led by the oldest resident, who claims to remember every crime and punishment since that business with the cheese wheel. Evidence is optional, and memories are flexible. "Did you take the porridge?" someone asks. "I saw you near the pot." "But I was chasing the goat." Exactly. Everyone knows goats love porridge. Soon, the discussion spirals into a retelling of the time a sheep was blamed for eating the abbot's dinner, only for it to turn out the abbot ate it himself by mistake during a midnight snack. Moral: always label your food and never trust a hungry, holy man. When deliberations begin, anyone within earshot is encouraged to join in, especially if they have a story, a suspicion, or just a fondness for drama. Someone proposes a trial by ordeal. The accused must carry a turnip on their head while reciting the village anthem backward. If the turnip falls, guilty. If it stays, innocent, or at least entertaining enough to forget the original charge. Punishments are famously creative. For minor crimes, you might be assigned extra mud-clearing duty, or forced to help the baker clean his oven, a task so perilous, even the mice avoid it. Public apologies are delivered from atop a barrel, sometimes in rhyme if the crowd is feeling festive. A well-timed joke can reduce your sentence, while a show of repentance, real or theatrical, usually earns a round of applause, and a plate of yesterday's stew. More serious infractions, such as borrowing the abbot's hat or claiming to have invented a new calendar, are handled with elaborate ceremony. The abbot delivers a speech on tradition, community, and hat etiquette. The villagers listen politely, already plotting next week's prank. In the end, the sentence is almost always commuted for a donation of bread, cheese, or, if you're really in trouble, a batch of that suspiciously strong turnip wine. If you appeal, your case is escalated to the monks, who consult the Big Book of Rules, a tome so heavy and confusing that nobody has ever finished reading it. The monks emerge from their chambers, nod gravely, and declare that mercy is the highest virtue, especially if there's soup on offer. Most appeals end with everyone agreeing to forget what happened, provided it doesn't happen again until at least after the next festival. Some crimes, however, are never truly resolved. The missing porridge becomes legend, a bedtime story for children who dream of finding it still warm in the ashes. The goat remains at large, a fugitive in her own barn. The abbot's hat continues its mysterious journeys, appearing in places no hat has any right to be. And so, order is restored, more or less. The fire crackles, the council disperses, and everyone agrees that justice has been served, if not exactly in the way anyone expected. In the missing millennium, the law may be flexible, but the sense of community and the power of a well-timed turnip endures. So you drift off to sleep, knowing that here everyone gets a fair hearing, a fresh start, and, if they're lucky, an extra slice of bread to sweeten the verdict. So, as the fire burns low and the last church bell fades into the mist, you can finally let out a sigh of relief. You survived another day in a century the world barely remembers, a day of mud, mystery, missing inventions, and meals that tasted suspiciously like last week's dinner. Through it all, you endured foggy mornings, confusing calendars, and the unique joy of paying taxes in root vegetables. You learned that progress isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it's a circle, or a wheel that rolls away in the night. You watched kings come and go, saints multiply like rumors, and every simple comfort take on a kind of heroic significance. Bed was lumpy, bathing optional, and breakfast a guessing game. But somehow, in the gentle chaos of the missing millennium, life carried on, awkward, unrecorded, and quietly astonishing. Tonight, as you settle into the softness of your own bed, clean sheets, hot water, not a single rat in sight. Maybe take a moment to be grateful for how far we've come. No monks will confiscate your inventions, and the only wheel likely to disappear is the one in your head, spinning as you drift towards sleep. If history teaches us anything, it's that people have always found ways to survive, to laugh, and to hope, even in centuries that nearly slip through the cracks. So let yourself relax. Breathe in the calm. Know that the struggles and absurdities of the past made this moment possible, and that, no matter how strange, lost, or lumpy the centuries may have been, every night ends the same, with stories, with sleep, and with the comfort of knowing you are, finally, home. Good night, time traveler. May your dreams be vivid, your mattress forgiving, and your morning less mysterious than the 1,000 years we just left behind. Sleep well,